Hey, this is Janet, the youngest member of the Jacksons. How you doing? You're looking terrific. You feel fine?
I'm having a lot of fun.
Really?
When you look back on your relationship with your father, is he predominantly a good man, do you think? How would you position him?
I think my father means well. I think he means well and wants nothing but the best for his kids. I just think that the way he went about certain things wasn't the best way. But it got the job done. And
9.16 seconds. That's all it took to nearly erase a 40-year career. 143 million people watched it happen live. One split-second wardrobe malfunction, one man's impulsive move, and a woman who had spent her entire life fighting for control lost it all in an instant. Janet Jackson had sold over 100 million records worldwide. She transformed pop music into a platform for social protest. She showed an entire generation of black women that power isn't handed to you, it's seized. She became the blueprint for independence, strength, and unapologetic excellence. But in February 2004, the same industry that built her decided she had gone too far. Radio stations dropped her songs overnight. MTV and Viacom blacklisted her videos. Award shows quietly removed her. Labels distanced themselves. Her next album, Damita Jo, was buried before it could breathe. She wasn't punished for failure. She was punished for existing in a body, for a mistake that wasn't even hers alone, while the man beside her walked away largely unscathed. This wasn't just a scandal, it was the brutal climax of a lifetime battle against control. To truly understand the fall, we must return to the beginning. Gary, Indiana, May 16, 1966. Janet Damita Jo Jackson entered the world as the youngest of 10 children in a household that had already become a ruthless hit-making machine. Her older brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and Michael, were already the Jackson 5, rehearsing relentlessly in the cramped living room, chasing Motown dreams that belonged entirely to one man, Joseph Walter Jackson. Joe Jackson didn't raise children, he engineered performers. The house on Jackson Street wasn't a sanctuary, it was a boot camp. Mistakes weren't corrected with patience, they were punished with belts, switches, or whatever was closest. Tears were forbidden. Childhood was a luxury the Jacksons simply couldn't afford. While neighborhood kids rode bikes and played freely, the Jackson siblings rehearsed for 5, 6, sometimes 12 hours a day. Joe sat like a warden, belt in hand, barking orders. Again. One wrong step, one flat note, and the entire family felt the consequences. Perfection wasn't ambition, it was survival. Janet was too young to join her brothers on stage at first, but she was never too young to absorb the fear. From her crib, then from the shadows of the rehearsal room, she watched the machinery grind. She learned early, feelings were dangerous. Obedience was safety. Silence was power. By 1969, the Jackson 5 had signed with Motown, and the family relocated to Los Angeles. The houses grew larger, the cars flashier, but Joe's iron fist never loosened. Janet was just 3 when her brothers became global superstars, their faces plastered on lunchboxes and magazine covers. She understood absence before she understood fame. Her brothers were constantly gone, touring, recording, performing, returning exhausted, sometimes bruised, always silent. Her mother, Catherine, was deeply religious, a devout Jehovah's Witness who offered prayers and quiet comfort, but she couldn't or wouldn't fully shield her children from Joe. Years later, Janet would reflect painfully, her mother was loving yet powerless to protect them. By age 7, Janet was performing in the family's Las Vegas variety show, singing and dancing on command. No one asked what she wanted. The Jackson children didn't have personal dreams, they inherited Joe's. School brought no escape. Classmates saw her only as Michael's little sister. Teachers treated her with a mix of awe and suspicion. Friendships? Impossible, when every spare minute belonged to rehearsals and performances. The household ran on secrecy. Joe's rumored affairs were whispered but never confronted. Violence was endured but never discussed. Janet learned the ultimate survival skill: smile for the cameras, bury the truth, perform happiness while dying inside. Michael's solo ascent in the late 1970s turned him into the biggest entertainer on earth. Family conversations revolved around his tours, his sales, his records. Janet sat quietly, internalizing the lesson: your worth is measured by what you sell. By age 10, she was working professionally. By 11, starring on television. By 12, contributing financially to the family. Childhood wasn't delayed, it was erased. There were no sleepovers, no innocent crushes, no lazy weekends. Only the constant terror of disappointing Joe. Janet later confessed she spent much of her youth terrified, not from the dark or strangers, but from her own father. I was terrified of him, she said. We all were. That fear forged perfect, suffocating obedience. In 1977, at just 11 years old, Janet landed the role of Penny on the hit sitcom Good Times, an abused child desperately seeking love. The irony cut deep. She was acting out trauma she lived daily at home. Joe chose the role, negotiated the deals, and took the earnings. Janet simply delivered the tears on cue. Roles on Different Strokes and Fame followed without pause. Then, because Joe demanded it, a music career. At 18, her self-titled debut album flopped. At 18, Dream Street suffered the same fate. She later admitted she didn't even want to sing at first. It was forced upon her. But in the Jackson machine, desire was irrelevant. You performed, you obeyed, you generated revenue. At 18, in a desperate bid for freedom, Janet secretly married James DeBarge. The impulsive union was born out of a hunger to escape her father's grip. It collapsed quickly amid addiction and volatility. Joe and Catherine had it annulled. Janet was pulled back under control. Rumors of a secret child swirled for years, whispers she has always denied, but they underscored a deeper reality. Janet's life was constantly narrated by others. By 1985, at 19, she had worked professionally for 12 years, 3 TV shows, 2 failed albums, a shattered marriage. Yet she had never made one authentic decision about her own existence. She was a puppet, and the strings were choking her. Then came the quiet revolution. Janet fired her father. It wasn't explosive, no scream match. She simply called Joe and told him he was no longer her manager. For a young woman conditioned to obey, this single act was seismic. The family structure trembled. Joe was enraged, but Janet had finally chosen herself. She connected with visionary producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis in Minneapolis. They didn't see Michael's shadow or Joe's product. They saw untapped potential. When she said she wanted to make an album about breaking free, they listened. In the studio, they asked questions no one ever had. What do you want to say? What do you feel? At first, Janet struggled. She had spent her life voicing other people's visions, but slowly her truth emerged. The pain of control, the hunger for autonomy, the desire to be seen as Janet, not Michael's sister. The result was Control, 1986. This time I'm going to do it my way. The title track was a manifesto. What Have You Done For Me Lately demanded respect. Nasty confronted harassment with fire. The Pleasure Principle celebrated self-worth. The album exploded. It topped the Billboard 200, spent over 2 years on the chart, and sold over 10 million copies worldwide. 5 top 5 singles. Janet went from background Jackson to solo superstar on her own terms. The transformation was visible. She stood taller, spoke with clarity, chose her own image. The Control World Tour was a victory lap, sold-out arenas, military-precise dance, audiences screaming for the freedom she embodied. For young black women especially, Janet became a beacon. You don't have to wait to be saved. You save yourself. 3 years later, she could have coasted. Instead, she risked everything with Rhythm Nation 1814, 1989. This wasn't another empowerment album. This was a bold confrontation with America's failures. Racism, poverty, homelessness, illiteracy, drugs, violence. At 23, Janet used pop's biggest stage to force a nation to face uncomfortable truths. "We're a nation with an unspoken truth," she declared. Side A tackled social issues with spoken word interludes. Side B explored personal relationships. The production was sharp, urgent, futuristic. The title track's video showed Janet in stark black military attire, leading dancers in choreography that felt like combat. No sequins, no softness, just raw power. "Miss You Much," Rhythm Nation, Escapade, All Right, Come Back to Me, Black Cat, Love Will Never Do Without You. 7 top 5 singles on the Billboard Hot 100, a record no album has matched since. 4 reached number 1 across 3 different years. The album topped the Billboard 200 for 4 weeks and became the best-selling album of 1990 in the US and sold over 12 to 14 million copies worldwide. It was certified 6 times platinum. Schools incorporated the songs into assemblies. Teachers used the lyrics for social justice lessons. Young people adopted the black military aesthetic as a symbol of resistance. Janet wasn't just entertaining, she was educating, protesting, and mobilizing.